This is the way.
Hey, welcome to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Arey. So the fourth episode of Mandalorian Season 3 gave us an awesome moment of fan catharsis when the original Jar Jar Binks actor Ahmad Best returned as the Jedi who rescued Grogu from the Jedi Temple, which is awesome and so much better than any fan theory that we could have posted, and boy did we post a lot of fan theories.
Yeah, at one point I thought it was going to be like Justin Timberlake, reprising NSYNC's cut Jedi cameos from Attack of the Clones.
Wait, was that a real thing?
Yeah, man, look it up. Justin Timberlake was almost in a Star Wars.
Man, that's crazy. Alright, so we're halfway through this season, and we've had some highs like Ahmad Best and some lows like Ahmad Best fight sequence. But I think it's stunning that this season of The Mandalorian has actually been the lowest rated of the series. The trailer had so much hype around it. Hardcore fans were pumped to see this era of Star Wars continue, so why the low ratings? A little later I'm going to be joined by ScreenCrush editor-in-chief Matt Singer and IDW Comics editor Heather Antos to get their thoughts on the season, but first here's my take on it. First of all, a lot of people I talk to are getting confused by this show.
Yeah, man, I'm here every day and even I'm getting confused.
Right? So, when The Mandalorian first came out, hardcore Star Wars fans like us obviously watched it. It was a massive hit because it also pulled in casual viewers. The number one question I got asked back then was if this took place 1,000 years in the past, like was this the literal Baby Yoda? But the show worked because it was for the most part a self-contained cowboy adventure that would riff on westerns and Kurosawa, but you know, with a cute puppet. But now we've got Bo-Katan, Death Watch, Boba Fett, religious symbolism, the Clone Wars. Like, if you only watched these movies when they first came out, you might not remember that Boba Fett was a clone of Jango Fett and like looked like all the stormtroopers.
Clone troopers.
That's my point. To the casual viewer, they look like stormtroopers. I mean, the story of Bo-Katan has been told through 8 episodes of the Clone Wars across 6 seasons and 2 episodes of Rebels, not to mention it ties into Darth Maul, and casual viewers don't even know that he survived his fight with Obi-Wan in The Phantom Menace. Now, I have no problem following all of this because I'm Ryan Arey. But the show hasn't done a great job of introducing its wider lore. I have no problem with this, but a lot of moms are texting their sons after every episode, and those moms have questions. I think the biggest reason The Mandalorian has started off slow this season is because for some reason they squandered the amazing cliffhanger of season 2. I mean, I can't wait to hear from Matt Singer on this because he's written pieces about this on ScreenCrush.com that you really should check out. Season 2's ending was right up there with The Empire Strikes Back as far as Star Wars cliffhangers go. Din and Grogu were separated. What next? Except somehow that cliffhanger was resolved in a standalone episode of the Book of Boba Fett. I love pretty much all Star Wars, so when something in Star Wars is mediocre or outright bad, it breaks my heart. Like, the Book of Boba Fett was just disappointing. Sloppy storytelling, poorly placed flashbacks, fan service with no meat on the bun. I could go on, and I have gone on. The Return of the Mandalorian was the best episode of that series, and that episode should have been the first episode of this season of The Mandalorian, showing Din struggling to find his way without Grogu, beginning his quest to be redeemed in the living water. Then all that Jedi training stuff should have also been in this season of The Mandalorian, building the tension of whether or not Grogu would stay with Luke. Also, they should have recast Luke instead of deepfaking him. But instead, Grogu reunited with Din in the finale of Boba Fett, at least giving that show some emotional connection to the audience. But this would have been like if you watched The Empire Strikes Back, Han's frozen in carbonite, what's going to happen next? And then in Return of the Jedi, Han Solo's suddenly back with the gang because you had to watch a TV special to see the rebels rescue him from Jabba the Hutt.
It's like when the network made David Lynch reveal who killed Laura Palmer far too early.
Exactly. High five. But also, I think that people are turned off because the overall story of the show seems to be about the rise of the First Order and explaining this.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
And by the way, everybody, at our merch store at shopzeroedition.com, we have a brand new Somehow Palpatine Returned t-shirt that you can check out, along with our Doug the Foundling tee. Check them out with the link down in the description. Shopping our merch store really does help out the channel, and we appreciate you guys watching. So, this whole story with Grogu's blood, Pershing standalone episode, it's all explaining how the Emperor cloned himself. Even though the sequel trilogy made a lot of money, the movies aren't that popular. There's not like an outcry of demand for more stories about these characters. So dedicating hours and hours and hours of storytelling to explaining one stupid screenwriting choice doesn't exactly draw viewers in. But I have to say though, I am not one of these detractors. I am loving this season. For me, it is the perfect mix of nostalgia and laying the groundwork for the sequel trilogy. And I think that the show set in this era of Star Wars can actually help fix some of the mistakes of those sequel movies, in the same way that the excellent Clone Wars series fixed the prequel trilogy. That show gave Padme and Anakin a deeper bond, introduced Ahsoka, and showed what life was like for the clones as they carved out their individual identities. However, I don't think that the Clone Wars should be required programming for watching another show like The Mandalorian. The Force Awakens started off the trilogy all wrong. It reintroduced a new empire with no explanation and no creativity. It's just more stormtroopers and more Death Stars, just more of the same. Bringing back Palpatine at the last minute smelled like desperation. And it was pretty clear that Lucasfilm never had a plan for the most anticipated Star Wars trilogy since 1983. But now, we're seeing the seeds of the First Order being planted. We're foreseen that Palpatine's return was more than just a hasty screenwriting decision. It was a carefully laid plan that took decades to execute. What makes Star Wars so wonderful is that it's an incredibly broad canvas that can tell hundreds of different stories from different filmmakers of all stripes. We can get a meditative character spy thriller like Andor in the same universe where Jar Jar makes a fart joke. You could have given me an entire episode of Pershing, filing, and eating ice cream, and I would have loved it because I love visiting the galaxy that's far, far away. So now I really want to hear from our guests. We have ScreenCrush Editor-in-Chief Matt Singer and IDW Senior Editor Heather Antos. Matt, you've written about this season of The Mandalorian on the website. Some great pieces I highly recommend everybody check out. Where do you think we are in this season? How are you enjoying it, and why do you think maybe it's not resonating with viewers as much?
Well, I'd be lying if I didn't say I was a little disappointed by the season so far, which at this point, as we're talking, is basically half over, right? So, I mean, I think a lot of what you said in your introduction kind of touches on the points and the problems that I'm having, although you said moms are texting their sons. I don't have my mom isn't texting me. I guess I'm the dad here. Maybe dads are texting Ryan, because it's me going like, Ryan, I don't know about this, dude. I don't know. When The Mandalorian started, I mean, I really loved that first season a lot, and it was like, man, Star Wars is back, and it really reminded me of the feelings that I had for the world when I was a kid, but also for a lot of the movies, like the recent movies, which from time to time I've really, really enjoyed. And it just seems like over time, it seems like the target audience of the show seems to be narrowing tighter and tighter until the target audience for the movie, for the show rather, and I say this with all due respect, is Ryan. Like, if you're Ryan, this show is for you. It almost could be made by him in a way. I mean, sometimes I feel like I haven't really gotten the full experience of the show until I have talked to him or watched the other videos on our channel, because there are things that I'm just not getting, not putting together. And I will say though, you talked about, people who are more very casual fans. Like, yes, I have not watched Star Wars: The Clone Wars, but I wouldn't really call myself like a casual fan. I have seen every Star Wars movie multiple times. I've seen every episode of this show. I watched the Book of Boba Fett. I've read Star Wars comics as a kid. Like, it's weird to be like, well, you don't know enough to fully savor the brew that is this iteration of The Mandalorian. It just seems like the show is really kind of narrowing its focus on a lot of this really intense mythology, some of which I don't know, some of which I don't feel like I even should know yet, but the show is really struggling to make me care about it. And I guess that's even the bigger issue. It's not so much that I don't know these things, but it's not made in a way that makes me go, wow, I'm really interested in these parts. It just feels, especially this season, to be kind of marking time. That we ended on this incredible cliffhanger from the second season, and you talked about this as well, Ryan, and it doesn't seem like the show has really replaced that with anything. I'm not really so much angry that they resolved that on the Book of Boba Fett. I'm more confused why they did it. Because it's not like they seem to have, done that so that they could get to this incredible story that they could not wait to tell. So far, whatever that story that they're telling is, it's taking a long time to get there. We're now half of the season in so far to The Mandalorian Season 3, and, we had one episode where the main characters were barely present, and this week's episode was like 20 minutes with like an extended flashback. So I'm just sort of struggling to see where we're going. The original sort of premise of the show, I got it from season 1, that it was almost like an anthology show. Each week they go to a different planet, they help a different set of people, they solve a different problem. And more and more, I just kind of miss that version of the show.
You know, it's interesting. If you compare this to John Wick, and very, very light spoilers for the first John Wick movie, you know, John Wick, you start off with an extremely relatable guy. His wife's passed away. She leaves him a dog. Some stuff happens. He goes on a revenge story. But the first movie really did a great job of seeding this larger world. Like John Wick had these coins that he used to pay for things. And what's that? And what's this hotel? Here is my cat. So that show and that series did a great job like hinting at a larger world. And I feel like maybe that's because it kept character first. And in The Mandalorian this season, maybe they've lost focus on like that actual character-driven story. Heather, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that? Are we losing a bit of the character drive? What's your thoughts on the season so far?
I think absolutely we are. You know, you said it, and Matt agreed that I'm just confused about what this season is trying to do. My biggest question constantly in every single episode has been, what are the stakes? Why does this matter? Why am I watching this episode? You know, watching the season individually, the episodes are interesting and fun, but when you look at it as a season as a whole, the connectivity just isn't there, aside from it's Star Wars and it all happens in this universe. You know, the episode we had last week where it's about you know, the ex-Imperial officers and scientists, like, I would watch a whole season about that. I thought that episode was particularly interesting. I don't know why it's in The Mandalorian, but you know, and it's moments like that, you know, this last episode exploring the Mandalorian culture, like, that's cool. If that was this whole season, every single episode telling that story, I think that's fascinating. But the connectivity just isn't there. I'm personally wondering if, you know, we're really crossing into, and I hate to say it, but just complete oversaturation. You know, it's one of the issues that a lot of people say about the Marvel movies. You know, I can't watch the new Ant-Man movie without having watched 20 years of other films, you know, in order to understand the minutia of what's going on and why this matters and what affected this XX, you know, blah, 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 blah. Mandalorian, there's so much about this that you're not going to know had you not watched specific episodes of Clone Wars, had you not watched Book of Boba Fett, had you not read Legends materials that aren't even canon anymore. And that makes it a very difficult task to be able to just casually watch a show, you know, as a family, and fully understand the depths of everything going on, unless, of course, you're Ryan Arey.
Hi. Well, back to what I was saying about John Wick and like a simple character story. We had a simple character story really in seasons 1 and 2. Season 1, you know, he is a bounty hunter, saves this kid, goes on the run. Very easy to understand. Season 2, trying to get the kid back to his family. Very easy to understand. We left season 2, like I was saying earlier, on this great question. Oh my God, are they going to get back together? What is it with these guys? Like, how are they going to spend time apart? Is this going to further into... And then, like I said, a big problem with the story is that it was resolved off screen, basically, from this show. Heather, do you think that we're getting a kind of character-driven story at this point that is actually, like, getting viewers engaged?
Not about the Mandalorian, not about Pedro Pascal. You know, Din, certainly not about... you know, him. I think we're getting way more about Bo-Katan and her character than anything else. And so, you know, I mean, if seasons 1 and 2 were the explorations about Din and what being a Mandalorian meant to him, and then season 3 was an exploration about the Mandalorian as a culture and history, and, you know, which they sort of are touching on, that could be interesting. But there is no real, this is what this season is about. Here's the major threat that's going on. Here's what our characters want or are up against. It's all very esoteric, vague, reading in between the lines. And it constantly has me as a viewer being like, well, I think I know what they're going for, but I'm not 100% confident and sure. And that is, you know, if I, as someone who has told Star Wars stories professionally for the better part of a decade, am watching something like this and cannot confidently say, you know, this is the story they're telling, that, you know, that is troublesome. I think there's a lot of interesting things going on. The execution is just not hitting it.
Yeah, maybe we get to the point where a half-hour episode of a live-action show isn't necessarily the best format for telling that particular story. By the way, she's really into this pen. I'm trying to make it not too distracting.
It's a violation to have a cat in a video store. A dog and a cat.
I know.
Well,
I know.
the dog works here.
Right.
And this is like a bodega cat. She keeps the vermin away.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Matt, how about you? Are you feeling like maybe the other two seasons were more character driven? Is that like the connection? Because other franchises too have brought in these vast concepts. Like I know you haven't seen Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones is this enormous story that's rooted in human motivations and human tragedy. Are we still caring what the hell happens to these guys at this point, or do we need like a more clear-cut goal? If this whole season was supposed to be about bathing in the minds of Mandalore, well, congrats. You're done by, what, episode 2? What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it is a really good point to say, like, we don't even really know what the Mandalorian even really wants at this point, right? Like, okay, we understood the beginning of the season he wanted to redeem himself, and then he did that. And so it's like, okay, well, what's next? And it really, the character that does seem to have the most potential to change and evolve here is Bo-Katan. And it almost does seem like we're watching a Bo-Katan show more than a Mandalorian show the last week and a half, maybe. All the stuff going on with her being brought into that, into the Children of the Watch and putting her helmet on and not taking it off. And, are they going to hang around with these folks? Are they going to, in a way, it's almost like the show, like, it's not even the Mandalorian anymore. It's the Mandalorians. Like, the title almost does not seem to accurately describe what the show is at this point, because he's no longer the focus lately. I mean, he is sort of a secondary character in the last couple of weeks. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's like, well, if you really wanted to make a Bo-Katan show, maybe that's what you should have made, potentially. Like, but again, we don't know, because I totally agree. It's hard to really know where we're going at this point and what are the stakes. And, why we did have a whole episode all about sort of like life on Coruscant with these two unrelated characters that I gather has something to do with bringing a Palpatine back as a clone in a movie that most people don't tend to like. So why are we devoting time on a show we do like to something we don't like? Seems like the definition of throwing good money after bad to me, but what do I know? I'm just a guy talking on YouTube, so.
That's what the Clone Wars, did for us, though. The Clone Wars series did a great job of, building up the prequels. In a similar way, I kind of think Rebels actually took away from the original trilogy, but that's a whole other video. Sorry.
No, I think you bring up something, you made me think of something, Matt, that, not only was there a great cliffhanger in season 2 in regards to Grogu and what's going to happen with him, but, if you really, I think when in that first episode, when we saw that Bo-Katan was going to be a part of the season, and again in episode 2, anyone who has watched the Clone Wars, anyone who does know a little bit more about Mandalorian lore, Din ending up with the Darksaber was a really big deal to Bo. And, I thought this season was going to be exploring some sort of like warring factions between the two, or even if not that extreme, like there would be more tension between the two characters because of this. And like Bo in the first episode was kind of like, that's your problem.
Go home. There's nothing left.
And that's just basically been it, aside from the one time where she used it effortlessly and was kind of like, ha 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 ha, I can do it, you can't. But like, again, that's it. That's all, that is all we've gotten. And it's kind of disappointing, because I thought that was a really clear path, an avenue to good character building, great stakes, great tension, where you can still explore all this Mandalorian culture and lore that it seems they want to do.
And this is where I want to talk about that Pershing episode in particular. It reminded me of that episode of Stranger Things where 11 was just in Chicago for the entire episode. One of my favorite episodes. Everybody else seemed to hate it, but I don't mind like a little character side adventure. It reminds me of comics when you might have like a single issue of the X-Men devoted to just Cyclops going to Alaska and mourning his wife. I love those kind of issues. So for me, like you said, Heather, I was all in for the Pershing episode. Like I said earlier, just him eating ice cream and going to Monument Park, great, done, I'm in. And I do think that's going to pay off later in this season, not necessarily just in a grand scale of things. But for other people, it didn't work. I mean, do you think that people were going, who's that guy? Oh, was that the dude?
Your comparison to, the issues of X-Men where Cyclops goes to Alaska or Wolverine is hanging out in a bar or the X-Men are playing a game of softball, like, that's interesting to me because those are also my favorite X-Men issues. I love when they do that. So then I go, well, why didn't I like that episode very much at all of The Mandalorian?
Well, because Wolverine wasn't in it.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, that's the difference. This is not an example of that, if The Mandalorian went to Coruscant for an episode, that might have been really interesting. If we had gotten on this season an episode of Grogu just training with Luke, if they had continued season 2 in that way, maybe that's kind of what you're describing, and I would have liked it more. And in a way, this week's episode of The Mandalorian is kind of what you're talking about. Like, nothing much happens. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of them sitting around and training and seeing them forging armor and practicing weapons. And yes, they have a quest involving rescuing this child character. But really, I mean, there's no huge enemy in this week. There isn't, you know what I mean? Like, this week's episode is more like what you're describing in a way.
I was going to say this whole season has kind of been that in a way. And not to say, again, that that's wrong or bad. I love one-off comic book issues here and there. But again, you typically have a clear mission, a clear stakes, clear driving forces, wants, needs of your characters. And again, it's so esoteric.
Well, it's also, as you're describing, it might be a one-off season, not a one-off issue, or the difference between a one-off issue and a one-off graphic novel that takes up 6 issues or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, for that episode on Coruscant, it's like, if there are these bottle issues or episodes or these sort of very talky kind of small scale issues of comics or stories or whatever. But again, usually if it's going to be about these seemingly unrelated characters, they're going to get their own. You would do that in a miniseries or a storyline on its own. It's just to insert it into the middle of it in a way that at least after one additional week did not pay off in any way. It's just very sort of rambling, diffuse. It's just very and frustrating as a week-to-week thing. Something Ryan, as I wasn't kidding, I text Ryan after a lot of these episodes and go and ask him questions and sort of just talk about how I felt about it. And something he said to me, which I thought was really interesting, was like, when this show started, it was a great episodic show because every week sort of left you, it was like a self-contained adventure. They go to this planet, this happens, then they go off to the next planet, you know what I mean? And it was really great to watch week to week. This season feels like something that you would need to binge because every week it just kind of adds a tiny little incremental element to the story. It's not like you feel like you've gotten, like I did not feel on this week's show like I'd gotten a complete serving of The Mandalorian. It felt basically like a subplot of a larger episode, and the same could even be said last week too. And it's the kind of thing that if you were able to watch it in an 8-hour chunk, maybe it would work that way. But week to week, it gets frustrating because you're like, where are we going with this? Why am I tuning in next week to see? Like, what's the cliffhanger that I'm waiting to see resolved?
What's keeping me coming back? No, I think that's exactly it. Aside from I love Star Wars and I'm here for all of Star Wars.
And I love Din and Grogu and I do care about them. but it's like, what beyond that am I coming back for?
If I'm going to distill everything you guys are saying, it sounds like a two-pronged problem. One, what's the motivation for the characters? Like, what's driving them now that the quest is completed and everybody's all together? And I think the answer to that is something that we don't know yet, and that's got to do with Bo-Katan and her religious conversion and uniting Mandalore, something that's very esoteric and hard to pin down. The other thing that's also very esoteric right now is who's the villain? What's the threat? And I think we saw the hint of that in the Coruscant episode with Kane, who, by the way, I'm a huge, you guys, I do this for a living. I did not remember who Kane was. So even I had to go back and look at IMDb. Oh my God, that one, yeah. But we have Kane as this like Hydra-like influence inside the New Republic who's building up the First Order or something. I think that's all going to be revealed. Maybe Moff Gideon is still the villain. He's going to, get out on a technicality. Maybe they're building up the Thrawn, something like that. But I do think we need some sense of impending danger. Something that's like we're worried about for these characters. Apart from, we know Grogu's not going to get eaten by the alligator. Like there's something else. Which again is why that season 2 cliffhanger was so beautiful. Because we know they're not going to kill either character. But they might keep them apart. That is always a danger in this show. And they kind of just threw it out.
I just really hope that, I hope you're right, Matt, and that when this is over, you can sit and watch all of it and, oh, this makes sense, and I see it now and can appreciate and yada, yada, yada. I hope that when they do connect, the Perishing episode and Coruscant and everything with the New Republic there, that it's not just and surprise! Like, I hope it's seated better. I hope there's some build to it. And I hope we get Thrawn eventually, but that's always my want and everything.
I mean, I'm of two minds about that whole Coruscant episode. On the one hand, I really hope we see it again, because otherwise that would mean that they only put it in there to set up another show, like a Skeleton Crew or another season of Boba Fett or something else, the same way that they, used Boba Fett in some bizarre way to kind of propel forward the Mandalorian for, again, reasons that I still do not understand, and is one of the, like, my biggest question about all of this is why do that? But on the other hand, I sort of was like, I don't need this stuff in a show about, this father and his son bounty hunters. Like, at this point I realize it's foolish, but I do sort of just kind of hope the show gets back to that, is like the relationship between father and son as they kind of travel the galaxy. Clearly, that show is over. My dream of that is foolish. But I kind of wish that that's what it would get back to, because those are the parts of the show that I enjoyed the most, was when that was what it was about. And like, this guy who was such a solitary figure suddenly having this other person in his life and trying to deal with that. And yeah, I don't know. I'm sort of both hopeful there's some sort of payoff to that episode and slightly dreading it, because I feel like it will only further take the show away from what I like about it. But I guess we'll see.
I mean, maybe this is, Favreau's been so influenced by the Westerns that influenced George Lucas to begin with. Maybe this is the good and the bad and the ugly. Maybe the characters are briefly stepping into a larger conflict, like the Civil War battle sequence in that movie, and then they're going to be a part of that, and then at the end of it, they're going to have some reason to go off and fight Thrawn. Maybe.
But who is the bad and who is the ugly? In order to tell that story, you need these really big, huge, epic characters to confront one another. And even if you like that episode on Coruscant, I don't think you can tell me that those characters were the bad or the ugly, or these sort of mythical figures who are going to come into conflict with. Din.
No, they're not. Sure. I mean, if we have any pattern that we can go off of, it unfortunately with the showrunners is they're going to be characters that will, all the bad and ugly is building and brewing and happening off screen, and then they're going to pop in for an episode, and I worry it's going to be something like Cad Bane and Boba Fett, right? I worry that Thrawn is going to show up, and whether it's in Mandalorian or in Ahsoka or any of the other shows, right? I worry it's going to be him showing up And all the hardcore fans who have consumed everything and grown up with everything are being, oh my god, holy shit, we see Thrawn, we see, XYZ, these characters. And then that's it. And people who have never consumed anything else other than, Mandalorian or the Disney Plus shows or the movies are going to be like, what? Why does this matter? Who, and that's what I fear with this show. That's, because there is a track record and a pattern of events. And sometimes I worry that Dave Filoni is so into these shows and so in Star Wars that he doesn't know what he doesn't know, and he doesn't know what his viewers don't know. And it makes it tough.
In every one of our videos, I went back, I rewatched our very first Mandalorian recap video, which is only 12 minutes long from the first episode. And the reason it was only 12 minutes long, I know, I look at it now and I'm like, amateur. But the reason it was 12 minutes long is because I didn't realize I had to stop and explain things for other people, who may be the layperson. So I do that now.
Ryan, I'm sure your videos have gotten better as you've gotten more along, but maybe that video was 12 minutes long because it didn't need to explain everything, because it was very accessible. I went back and rewatched the actual first episode of The Mandalorian. You don't need to have watched any Star Wars beforehand. You don't need to know anything about Star Wars. It's more of a Western than a Star Wars. It's a bounty hunter show. It is, a guy wandering the wilderness. And it's got cool creatures and weird monsters and crazy guys with blue faces. And it's fabulous. And you don't need to know anything. So maybe that's part of it also, is that now you need someone like you giving you an appendix after every episode and the footnotes and saying, well, on episode 15 of Clone Wars, this character appeared. And it's like, that can be fun. I actually enjoy learning these things through your videos. But if I don't watch them, sometimes I'm kind of like, who is this person? So it's a mixed bag.
Well, guys, thank you both for joining me. Really appreciate it. Heather, where can the people find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Heather Antos on all of the things where I talk Star Wars and Star Trek.
She's a great follow. Matt Singer?
My Twitter handle is @MattSinger, and of course, ScreenCrush.com. I'm there every day. All the articles we mentioned are up there if you want to read more of that. So.
And again, Matt's written some great pieces for this season of The Mandalorian and past seasons of The Mandalorian. He also had the gall to say that there should be a film in the movie theaters that he could take his children to. He wrote a great piece on that on the site. You should check them out. But we want to hear from all of you guys down in the comments. Let us know what you think of the season so far of The Mandalorian, yay or nay, or you can at any of us on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash the bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Arey.